The Polyglot Gathering is organized by Education at Internet.
How are you all feeling? Yeah? I think a bit more of a woo might be better. There's a woo. Come on, how are you all feeling? Yes. There we go. That's better. You all have a hard night last night, out partying, is that what it was? Yeah. Enjoying Brno a little bit too much. Well, that's understandable. I mean, how often do we get together, right? Twice a year, max? Maybe if we're lucky, we get to go to another event where there are other language enthusiasts. But typically, it's the gathering and the conference, the main two events that a big crowd will come to. You've then got Polyglotar, obviously, in Brazil, if you're able to make it to Brazil. So there are a few events, but obviously for these big numbers, yeah, there's only a couple of opportunities a year. And I always love coming. People ask me, people have asked me here how many of these I've been to. Oh, it's Montgomery III. Hello, sir. Welcome to this talk. I'm very pleased that you made it. So, for me, it's always a pleasure to come. This is my 10th in person, but I've been to every single gathering, online and in person. And I just want to say before we start my presentation, huge thank you to everyone who's worked on it. The gathering every year, I thoroughly enjoy it. And I enjoy it because of the people that put it together, and all of you come as well. Without you, I always say this at the conference, and I'm going to say it here too, it's just me standing here talking about things I like in an empty room. So thank you. I appreciate you supporting me by coming. And whenever I come, people often ask me if I go to the talks, and most often I don't. I actually stand around one of the common areas deliberately so I can actually talk to you. Because you're the reason I come. I come because I want to connect with other people who love languages like I do. And it was the same when I first created the Polyglot Conference all those years ago, and it's still true today. So if you haven't come and said hello to me because you think, oh, maybe he's busy or he's scared, I'll tell you if I'm busy. I'll be honest. I'll be polite, I hope. But if you ever want to talk to me, please always feel free to come and talk to me. That's what I'm here for. And that's what I enjoy, and that's why I love coming. So thank you for being here. Right. I suppose I should start, right? Okay. I was born in a bubble. This is where I'm from. My bubble was simple. I didn't really see anything special about it. Just as you were born in bubbles. And your bubbles were also very ordinary, very normal. Your bubble was formed by the family and the house and the way you grew up at home. That's the bubble. That's the first bubble. That's our bubble, our original bubble that we know. This is the beginning. Cast your minds back to your first bubble. How was it? What was it like? What was in it? What sounds were in it? Which words were present? Which words were important to you? For me, this bubble was, as I found out later, a dialect of English that was then often mocked as sounding uneducated. It was a bubble of sounds that weren't in standardized English. I had the ch sound in my English. People would say chicken. I also had different verb tenses as well. I didn't realize this at this stage. But there were different elements that were introduced to me during this stage of languages that I found out were other languages later. I knew how to count in Welsh. Un, dau, tri, pedwar, pump, chwech, saith, wyth, naw, deg. For me, those numbers were just numbers I learned as well. I knew them, didn't know Well, I kind of had an idea, as I was explained to a bit later, but I just knew these things. And these were all in the safety of my initial bubble, my beginning bubble. Then I started leaving the familiarity of my home, my parents, my brother, and I was bumping bubbles. My bubble got a bit shinier, a little bit more interesting, because I'd hear these words and these languages at school from people who had slightly different accents. Some people may have come from a different part of the United Kingdom and spoke in a different manner. And so I would start hearing things on television. Of course, welcome to the BBC. Oh, people speak differently to me. And at school, some of my classmates who spoke in a pretty, normal way for me, all of a sudden were taught how to really enunciate and have elocution lessons. Oh, we have to speak a different way then. I was a natural mimic, and I think this is where I realized very early on that I could hear an accent or a different way of speaking, and I was just intrigued. And like all of us in this room, we learn languages because we want to belong. We belong to a different tribe, to a different friend group, to be able to imitate. And this is what I was doing too. And so the shininess of the bubble was starting to appear with these accents. I could stop performing. I'd turn on TV and I'd watch a film and, oh my God, it's amazing. Everyone speaks with an American accent. Oh my God, I want to speak like that too. But then maybe you'd hear someone with a different way of speaking English and you'd think, what are they doing with that different accent? It's also American, but it's quite different. And what does that mean? What are the connotations attached to that way of speaking? And you'd pick up on the sociolinguistic reference points that were raised by using a certain accent, sometimes for comedic effect. We'd also have shows on TV with Scottish English. There was Rab Sy'n Nisbet. And it wasn't until later that I found out that actually imitating that accent and doing it for comedic effect actually was quite derogatory. But for me, it was really interesting to hear a different way of using the language. And also some of the expressions that you'd get from Scottish English or from Scots that you'd have in my dialect of English. Like, he's a right head the ball. He's a right head the ball, we'd say in Scouse, mean that person's crazy. He's a head the ball, as in with the football on the head. So these shiny bits were coming through for me linguistically, and it showed that I could try and belong to these different groups. You become the bubble. Now, at this stage, you're at school and you're learning things. You're being taught things. You're not just picking things up. I was at school and I had French. I was French from a very young age. And, I'd go to my class and stuff, and I just loved it. J'adorais la langue. Et pour moi, c'était pas que ça, quoi. La grammaire, le vocabulaire, c'est aussi l'accent. Comment prononcer la langue française? It was this pronouncing it and trying to speak and get as close to that linguistic group as possible. And that's something that I hear about very often. It's how do I improve my accent, my pronunciation? But I'll never be French. I'll never be Scottish. I'll never be these things because I'm not these things. I'm me. And my version of these things is my version of these things. My version of English is my version of English. And so I add them to my bubble. Like shiny hues of color that start to make up the tapestry of who I am and my linguistic identity. Many of you will ask me why I don't have flags on here. I don't feel that the flags represent me in any of my languages. Because I don't speak English, I speak Richard Simcottese. And my Richard Simcottese is made up of lots of words that have different connotations in my brain as I've been picking up these different accents, as I've been playing with different dialects, as I've been playing with different linguistic varieties. All of these things make me, me. Then you start to think, how do I brighten up my bubble? Like you would your living space. You want to make it shine. You want to add bits to it that just make it feel a bit more, I don't know, interesting, I guess. And so did I. I discovered my languages. I'd go into old bookshops and I'd peruse the shelves in Oxfam and look for books in different languages in the vain hope that somebody had got bored of their Assimil book or their Teach Yourself book or their colloquial book, and they'd left it in Oxfam to be sold to people like me. And so I found all these books. I had books in Danish and Swedish and you name it, across the continent of Europe mainly, but I had all these books and I was intrigued. The internet wasn't really a thing back then. Yes, I know I look 21, and how on earth could you possibly be that old? But it's true. I remember the internet becoming a thing. But for me, this was a thing of listening to the Spanish spoken on holiday, listening to and seeing the words that were written in the supermarkets when I was with my family away from home, and trying to figure out what they were and what they meant. This meant buying lots of dictionaries and lugging them around, like some sort of weightlifter, going across Europe, traipsing across and trying to figure out how to make sense of the linguistic soup that was around me. But I would add to them. And I did, and I went on to study Spanish, and then went to university and continued studying my languages. And I would study at home, and I'd do things on my own with my own self-learning. So when people ask me, which language did you study and in what order? And I get that question all the time. I just don't know. When did I really study that language? Well, I did do that thing 20, 30, 40 years ago, was it? But then I didn't study it properly until then. So when do I say I started, and when do I say I actually studied it? And it becomes very complicated, and what seems like an easy question becomes actually quite involved. But this is the swirling on the bubble that you have that adds little specks of color that people see and perceive and then ask you about, and you're like, oh, I don't know where that came from. Maybe the etymology from some long-forgotten story of a linguistic endeavor, language learning through these books that I'd found and trawled through Oxfam trying to get and make sense of. But you do continue to beautify your surroundings. Have a think about the languages you've picked up and the reasons why and how and the history and what's involved in it, the cultural relevance for you. Your languages tell a story, right, of where you've been and who you've met. And so the bubble gets more color. The little bit of Arabic that you studied. For me, Arabic's been a language that I've taken on a couple of times, not got very far with, but then I'll meet an Arabic speaker and I'll hear it and it makes sense. Not always because of the Arabic that I studied, sometimes because of the Turkish I studied. Sometimes I just know the word and I don't really know why. But so the colors of these languages and these linguistic journeys that I've been on keep adding together. And the color of different linguistic regions starts to add to the hues that I see floating around in my language bubble. As you get more serious about your languages, sometimes you want to make them bolder and brighter. And so you add more definition. For me, this was going to university, and I did a degree in what was called combined languages. Now, combined languages was a degree program offered in the UK in just 5 universities. And we had to study a minimum of 3 languages for our degree. I studied French, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. Another common question I get is that C2 or C1 or B2? And I don't know is the answer, because these things didn't exist at the time I was studying these languages. I had a degree, I wrote a thesis in all 3 of French, Spanish, and Italian. I didn't have to write one in Portuguese. But I also sat in on the Scandinavian Studies degree because, as you do, so I studied Swedish and Old Icelandic at university too, and if that weren't enough, I decided I'd do some language exchanges with some students. There was a Romanian student at university with me who wanted to practice French, but none of the French people wanted to practice their English with her because she was Romanian with a Romanian accent. So one of my French friends said, "Oh, speak to Richard. He's basically the same kind of thing." And I was like, and he'll probably want to learn some Romanian. And yeah, my friend wasn't wrong. Of course, I kind of immediately agreed to learn some Romanian and exchange French. Similar thing with Catalan. I cut my teeth on Catalan. And it was at this point at university that I actually met my very first real polyglot. Now, when I was 14, I was traveling through France. I first heard this word in French. I never really used it in English, and no one was using it at all. But when I was in France, this man on the train, I was 14, I was traveling through Paris down to near the Swiss border, and I was speaking in French, of course, because I was in France. And this person said to me, "Well, you know, t'es polyglotte?" And I was like, "Je suis poly what?" I had no idea what this polyglot thing was. But then later at university, I remembered that conversation again, because the word came to me in English. This is one of the ways that the languages and the hues will mix together on your bubble. Word in one language might exist in another, but you don't know it yet. And then you find out it exists and you can use it. And so I met this person on Internet Relay Chat, IRC, which was an old chat forum where you could practice your languages. And I saw him in like several rooms. I thought, oh my God, he's worse than me. He's in like 8 or 9 rooms. It's crazy. What's he doing? So I was doing the same thing because I discovered this thing at university, and he got to talking to me, and I thought, I've got to find out who this guy is. So anyway, we exchanged numbers, and I called him on a payphone. Imagine, with coins, right? In my university dorm, because I had to talk to this guy. And he said, "Do you know what? If you like languages that much, start looking at the other languages in the family." And that's kind of how it all started to come together for me. And I'd started adding these different variations of the same color, the same language, family, to my bubble. And I found that this adjacent language learning the languages that are related, actually enhanced the colors of my bubble. And so my bubble felt more like this. As I moved forward, it was the boldest form that I'd ever seen of my bubble. The colors were merging, they were intermixing and interacting, and it just felt really good. There weren't the people like you around me at that point. There were people who'd come to do my degree, and you'd think, you've gone to study a degree called Combined Languages. Surely you are all absolutely crazy for these languages. Not really. The people were there very often because they liked those specific languages and those specific languages alone. They had some sort of connection, whether it was an interest, a hobby, family, whatever. But it was something very specific for each language. For me, it wasn't. It was just I wanted everything. And I wanted it all at once. And I wanted to get as deep into as much as I could. There was only one person I met at that point who was, I would describe now as a polyglot. And for me, the word polyglot means somebody who just loves language and loves learning languages that they don't necessarily need for their immediate community. Hands up, who's learnt a language or who's studying a language that they don't realistically need for their normal day-to-day life? Okay. So I see a lot of truthfulness in this room, people who are true, and then people who are pretending that they're doing it all for a really genuine reason that they definitely need the language. I won't pick you out and I won't point you out, but I've seen you. But the important thing is being the bubble, and being the bubble that you are. Nowadays, we're not in my world of growing up where I had a payphone that I had to put money in. We're now at a point where we just get this automatically on our phones. We pick up our phone, we open it, someone's speaking a random language. Might not be that random to you anymore. It might be a language that you've incorporated into your bubble already. You see that color swirling around constantly because of social media. For me, a lot of the jokes and the funny things that I see, the news stories that I see online are through Instagram, through TikTok. They're my two main sources of a lot of the languages I speak, because they're short clips and I see them very, very quickly. And I follow enough people now where these just become an integral part of my life. So even though geographically I'm nowhere near the Netherlands, I'm getting more Dutch now than I have in maybe the last 20 years, just through social media. Even though I'm learning Cornish, that's a language that is spoken by probably hundreds of people, if I'm being generous, right? I actually get this contact because I'm speaking to people on Zoom. I'm seeing Facebook pages that I'm a member of, seeing things written in Cornish, reading the language, because it becomes part of my bubble, thanks to social media, thanks to the friendships that I've made on this journey. And the question always becomes, how easy is it for you to integrate the languages you have or want to learn into your life? Do you think about that when you're thinking about the languages you learn, or why maybe you're not learning one as well as you thought you might? Why it's not sticking, why it's going back, why you have this attrition going on? What's this down to? Some languages stay with you, and I often wonder why. How does that happen? What's going on? Is it something we do? Is it something that happens to us? Is it a mixture of the two things? Because even with social media, some languages may not show up at all. For some reason, Maltese comes up for me every single day now after I was in Malta. And I read every news article in Maltese. And I know what's going on in Malta to this day, even after the conference ended last year. But with Hungarian, I get a few Hungarian content creators come up, but no news in Hungarian. And I often wonder how or why the algorithm chooses me for certain languages. But social media has this other side as well. We're faced with all these other bright bubbles, right, looking back at us. And it's hard to know what to choose. It's hard to know what to think. Have you ever been in that situation where you're wondering or second-guessing what you're seeing out there and who you're seeing out there? What that means, what it actually means for what they're doing, how they speak, what they say, how well they speak a language? These are questions, and these are things that people put on these badges, right? ABC. ABC, easy as 1, 2, 3. Easy as do, re, mi. ABC, 1, 2, 3, baby, you and me now. But that's really what it is. We're thinking about it in these easy terms. But the reality is, we could be the bubble, the bright bubble, looking in the mirror. And when we look in the mirror, we have our self-voice, our self-talk, talking us down. How many of you have been in that situation where you say, I'm actually pretty rubbish? Okay. I've had experiences at this conference, at this event, at the gathering this year, where I've heard people say things like this. I just want to share this with you because I think it's important to say. Don't say anything to yourself that you wouldn't say to people outside, externally. Would you walk up to somebody and say, do you know what, you're actually quite rubbish? Be kind to yourselves. We all feel this way. I feel this way sometimes. I think, my God, it's this imposter syndrome that people talk about. I look in the mirror and I think, do I really speak that language? Sometimes, yeah, you kind of doubt yourself. You might be tired. Something might be going on. But be kind to yourself. Because there's enough people out there who will be mean. We don't need to be mean to ourselves. And also, the same thing applies the other way around. You might perceive someone online not speaking that language particularly well one day, but you know what? A 5-minute clip of them speaking a language where you judge their accent, you judge their vocabulary, you judge the mistakes, you judge whether or not they're getting it right, whether it's understandable. That's not representative of the entire bubble. You're seeing a reflection, and a reflection by definition is a 2D way of looking at things. So when people critique online, they're critiquing just a very small thing that they've seen. Always keep this in your mind too. And always keep it in your mind when you're looking at other people. Because it can lead to bursting bubbles. How do you feel when you see this image? It's pretty sad, isn't it? Because when someone critiques your language, or you don't feel you did a good job, or you made too many mistakes, or you said something a bit wrong, or it can feel like your entire world has burst. And your bubble is your world. There are people who give up learning and give up speaking to people in different languages because of this. This is quite a serious thing, unfortunately. But out of the burst bubble starts a new bubble. If we're able to continue and be positive. My word, if I were to just stop every time my bubble was burst, I wouldn't be here now in front of you. It's happened many times. I lived in Germany for a month, saying every day to the family I was au pairing for, ich will ins Klo. Every day for a month. Basically, I was saying that I was going to jump in the toilet pan to go to the toilet. And I said, I can't believe you've waited a month to correct all that error. Do you know how hard it's going to be for me now to get that right in the future? Talk about a burst bubble. I felt so stupid. But I could at least laugh at it. It was funny. It was funny. And I grew from that. And I will not make that mistake in German again, believe me. So this is how we build our bubbles back, and we build them up. And we build them to what we want them to be. And the bubbles represent, for me, different types of languages. Pick a color, any color. Pick a hue, any hue. Pick a shade, any shade. However you want to look at the language families that you learn. They could be a blue, a green, whatever. Your German could be a green. Your kind of off-German might be more of a Dutch or a low-Saxon. You can pick different shades from these different families and represent them, have them all swirling around in your bubble. Because any of these colors are beautiful. And they're all beautiful. It doesn't matter if your bubble is mainly green or if your bubble is mainly lilac or pink or orange or whatever. It can be any of these colors, and it is equally valid and equally beautiful. And you can equally share something new with anyone else that you meet. Another question I got at this event: can I come to an event like this if I only speak a few languages or even just one language? I've learned things about language from children who are monolingual, because they have a unique perspective from their unique and individual bubble, just as I had my unique and individual bubble. We learn about these things. So whatever you choose, whether it's you want one color with lots of different hues, whether you just want one color for your bubble, your language bubble is worth exploring. You might want to mix it with other colors. You might want to mix it with just two or more. It's entirely up to you what you do. They could be unrelated languages and they mix very, very well because they enhance each other, because they complement each other, because they fit into different parts of you and your identity, and because they bring you joy. Because after all, if we're not learning languages because we enjoy it, why are we learning them? There's got to be some sort of reason, right? It might be economic, you might need it for work, but there's still going to be something joyful that comes out of that even. You get money, and you can buy things that you want, and you can travel maybe, or you can treat yourself to whatever's important. Or you could have a rainbow bubble. I like my rainbow bubble, but it's not better or worse than any of the other bubbles. It's just different. Sometimes these colors change. Sometimes they fade. Sometimes some of the colors feel like they've almost disappeared. But then a glimmer of them will reappear, and it will spread again. Some of the colors merge more harmoniously together because of interrelationships, because of history. They tell a story. Anyone here speak Hungarian? Yeah? The Turkish words, the Slavic words that are not related to your language make your language more beautiful. And it's these mixes and these discoveries and these stories that we find just enrich our own experience of the world. And everyone here has their own experience of the world, and it's always valid, and it's always good to share, because it gives you a different perspective to your own world, your own bubble, and the colors in it. So be your bubble. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I've got some questions here. Have you ever hated a language? No. Not really, no. I haven't hated a language. I've obviously, like everyone, you sometimes have negative experiences in a country or a place, and sometimes then you can hear a language and it reminds you of that. There can be a kind of a trauma attached to it, and that can happen. But hate the language completely? No, absolutely not. Is there any African language in the Simcottese bubble? I wish there were. I wish there were. This is one of the things that people used to ask a lot of, oh, you've learnt these European languages, why don't you go for something a bit more challenging? And the reason is I try to be, as far as I can, logical with my choices. Languages that I can easily incorporate into my bubble. I see what works. I have studied some Swahili. I did a Swahili challenge for a few months. Really enjoyed it, and I was hoping it would become part of my bubble, but it didn't. But I did see Arabic words that I knew in Swahili, which really I found comforting. I love that you discover these things that travel from my Macedonian as a home language all the way through to kind of Indonesia, Malaysia, and then all the way down through Africa into Swahili. And you find these little nuggets, these little gems, these colors of language that just enhance your experience. How many hours do you generally able to spend a day studying your various languages? I don't keep track. I really don't. I gave up keeping track. And the reason I gave up keeping track was, if they're part of my bubble, they're part of my bubble, and I'll just come across them. And if I forget something, I forget something. I can't remember everything. I'm not a machine. I make mistakes. I get things wrong. And sometimes I'll come out with the wrong language, especially if I haven't heard a language for a while or not used it actively for a while. And I come and then somebody speaks to me in a similar language. I might get it mixed up. It happens. It happens here sometimes. I studied in Czech Republic. I did an advanced diploma in Czech studies. And it was, fairly intense. It was to study at university in Czech. But a couple of times I've caught myself having this random Polish word come out or something, or someone has spoken to me in Polish and I reply in Czech randomly. It usually irons out over a period of time, but these are things that I accept as natural. Attrition is a part of the whole experience of the changing on the bubble surface of your languages. If you ever watch a bubble in real life, it doesn't stay the same, does it? The colors move around the bubble, right? And so why should we expect our brains and our own bubbles to be any different? So yeah, that's why I don't track them. If I may ask, what languages do your kids speak? I have kid, so just one. But yeah, I spoke to her in French, Spanish, German, and English growing up. And obviously, my wife and I speak Macedonian. So those 5 languages are the languages she understands and knows. Yeah, but she won't be coming to one of these events anytime soon, I don't think. At this moment, she likes other activities as well, so I just gave her what I could give her while I could give her them. Do you really speak all these languages? No, it's a fake. I'm a fake glot. This has all been an act just for you. I set up the Polyglot conference because I was pretending. Seriously, I honestly don't care what anyone says about my languages or me. And the reason I don't care is because you get to decide what you think I speak and how well you think I speak it. Why do I think that way? Because it doesn't change reality. It doesn't change reality. It doesn't. Thank you for clapping. I appreciate that. So, yeah, do I present as speaking C1 or C2 or B1 or B2 or A1 or A2 in a given language at any specific time? It doesn't really matter. If I can do what I need to do, then that's enough for me. And I don't do it for everyone to come up to me and say how amazing I am. This is just my bubble, and I'm just describing it to you. And if I need to explain my bubble in a different language, and I can, great. If it doesn't work so well, we'll see how we get on. But it doesn't matter. Do you keep adjacent languages separate from each other? How do I keep adjacent languages separate from each other? So I have this concept, and I don't know if any of you have ever heard me speaking about this. I have a concept of anchor languages in my brain. So in language families, I will tend to learn one or two of those languages very, very well, or in a lot of depth. That naturally happened for me. So with doing university studies in some of these languages, clearly you get some languages that you use a lot, and some of them for work or for travel or living in the country as well. They become anchor languages. So a good anchor language for me would be, say, French. But then, is my Romanian good? No. I find that it varies a lot how well I speak it, depending on where I am and with whom I'm speaking. Same with Catalan, it's kind of gone a little bit up and down over the years. But the languages that I've studied in depth tend to be what I call my anchor languages. They do help with the other languages that are not as strong, though, because when I was learning those languages that are similar, I'm always comparing and contrasting what's the same, what's different. And that still goes on in my head when I'm speaking. It also improves my knowledge of my own language. So an example of this would be the word for red in Catalan. Anyone know the word for red in Catalan? Vermell, which is like in Portuguese, which is? And which word is that in English? Vermilion, exactly. How many people have heard of the word vermilion before now? Okay, we're probably in the wrong room to ask that question. But to be fair, a lot of people outside may not have heard of that word. So these words enrich your own original language and the hues of your own original language roots. What do you think about Esperanto? Mi tre ŝatas la lingvon. Mi parolas ankaŭ Esperanton kaj ŝajnas al mi ankaŭ vera plezuro uzi ĝin ĉi tie en la gatheringo kaj en aliaj kongresoj. Mi tute ne parolas tre bone, sed mi eblas paroli, yes. Ĝi estas ankaŭ valida lingvo, ĉu ne? I like it, is the short answer. Yeah, I think it's fine to learn any language, as long as it brings you joy and adds to your experience. Correcting language learners is a tricky thing. Can you give me some tips about when and how to do this? Okay, I guess reading the room is quite important. So if someone's telling you something very, very serious, that's emotional, maybe not the right time to correct the language. There is a comedy sketch in the UK where there's an exchange student that's in the room, and she's basically speaking with a very strong Italian accent, and she goes, "All of my family die." No, all of your family has died. And you think, oh, okay, so read the room, it's very important. But I think echoing is good as a first strategy. So echoing back what they said, repeating back. And then you see how much that person is in tune or ready to accept the correction. Because some people might not be. Some people might not really care about any mistakes against the standardized form that they make. They might be quite happy just communicating. And if they get it wrong against a standardized form of the language, if you understand, does it matter? So think about what the goal is for them. Are they going to sit one of the exams, a language exam, and they need to get it right against the standardized form? Then yes, if you're a teacher and you're teaching it, then yes, clearly you're going to need to make a little bit more of an active effort. But yeah, think about what the situation is and the reason for speaking the language is. Is it communication? Is it not? Is it to speak the standardized form or not? What's your next language project? At the moment, I am learning Gaelic from Scotland. Tapalet. And so I'm going to continue with that, hopefully, if I pass my exam next week in my third and final unit. So I'm going to be starting again with, I think, kind of, Corsadish is probably like a B1-ish level, I guess. It's hard to define, right? It's not really been officially classified, but I've studied it for a year. And also I've been studying Gérier. How many people here know what Gérier is? Oh, we've got like 3 people saying they know what Gérier is. I love it. Okay. Does anybody want to say what it is? Shout out. Excellent. So it's the language of the island of Jersey, and it's like Norman French. So the interesting thing with a language like that is that you have these words that skipped English and went into Scots, for example. So the word in Gérier for a bag is un pouc, and Scottish, English, and Scots speakers here will know that you say a pork in Scotland for a bag. In English, we only have this in one expression that I know of, which is a pig in a poke. Has anybody heard of that expression? Yeah, then you're doing better than a lot of English speakers, to be fair. It's not very common, but it's related to letting the cat out of the bag, which I think is more common. You'd go to market and you'd buy a pig to take home, but what they do is instead they switch the pig out for a cat. And then you'd find the discovery of this treachery, this trickery, when they opened the bag and out sprang a cat. So yes, this is the thing that I like about these adjacent languages. But yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment. What will be in the future, I don't know. I'll probably try and brush up some Chinese, Mandarin Chinese for my time in Taiwan, Taipei for the conference, of course, in November. We'll see how I go. And do you have any favorite language you studied? If yes, what is it? Favorite languages, I mean, there are languages that are dear to my heart. I mean, Welsh, for example, is dear to my heart because it's my heritage language. Macedonian is dear to my heart because it's my home language. German is dear to my heart because I just love German. Yeah. It's not ich liebe dich, it's ich liebe Deutsch. How do you keep the acquired languages alive over time? Any strategies, tips? I don't worry about it. If I lose a language, I lose a language. We have a funeral and we move on. Sometimes I'll get the Ouija board out and we'll have a seance and we'll see if we can bring it back to life. Honestly, I don't worry. Because, look, everything in life is transient. We have to enjoy what we have right now at this moment when we've got it, and not worry too much about what's going to be or what might be or what could have been or what might have been in the past or the future. Right now is what counts. We have to enjoy the moment because we don't know if it's our last. And that was a bit deep, wasn't it? What were the hardest languages to learn and why? The languages I don't speak particularly well, I suppose. So I always quote Georgian for this. I studied it for a year at university in Malmö. Well, actually online, but at the University of Malmö. And after a year of Georgian studies, I basically can't say a thing. I can say gamarjobat, rogochart, gmadlobt, didmadlova, all these kind of basic expressions in Georgian, but I don't really retain much of it. And I think partly it's because it didn't become part of my bubble, which is why I chose this type of presentation, because it's important to understand what becomes a natural color in your bubble. And Georgian didn't at that time. It might do in the future. It gave me some interesting language stories. I remember that badrijan is the word for an aubergine, which is the same as patlıcan in Turkish, which is the same as patlıcan in Macedonian, which actually means a tomato and not an aubergine. And it gives me these interesting linguistic journeys. But apart from that, unfortunately, it's kind of gone. How did you create the bubbles in your slides?
So on dirait en français un cat farti d'un chat GPT.
So I did it with cat I farted. Yes, ChatGPT. Are you worried that tech is making our language skills irrelevant? Yine. Yes and no. Clearly, it is worrying. I think we have to change and innovate, and our bubbles need to adapt. But what are the reasons why we learn languages? I was interviewed on the Times radio a couple of weeks ago on this topic, in fact, because they just announced these new developments in Google where you could have translation or interpretation on a call. And it was in real time. And they asked me this question, and I said, you know, if I were learning languages just because I wanted to use them for work or for, you know, being able to communicate in another language, well, yeah, it's kind of the reason, but not really all of it. Part of it is, I don't know for you, but do you have this feeling of like a Sudoku puzzle in your brain when you start seeing the patterns appear and there's almost like a release of adrenaline, endorphins or something that goes on in your head? And you're like, oh, I've got it now. I can actually do the whole thing. And sometimes when you see enough numbers, that's enough for you, and you stop. And you move on to the next one. Do you get that as well? Yeah. So this is kind of one of the reasons why I do it. The other reason is that I like to build a tapestry. I like seeing the colors of my bubble come together and swirl around together, see how they interact. Almost like when you put a jigsaw puzzle together and you start putting on different elements of the jigsaw puzzle on the table, and you're working on them, and these could be each language family. And one language family might be the mountains in the background, another language family might be the stream in the foreground, but it makes a beautiful picture. ChatGPT can't do that for you. It can't be in your brain to do that for you. Even if you had a chip in your brain, and we get to that point, maybe we will, but I don't know how it will integrate into all of the memories, or if it can. Or we definitely won't see that in our lifetime. I can't imagine that in our lifetime. Maybe we will. Maybe I'm completely wrong, and this will become very old-fashioned very quickly. Look what an idiot he was. And you'll all be coming here like cyborgs. But no, that's why I do it. I do it for that and to travel. And you don't have the internet everywhere you go either, still, to this day. What language do you wish that was the lingua franca of the world? And what's your favorite constructed language? I don't have a favorite constructive language, and I don't have a language that I wish would be lingua franca. The reason is that one of the other reasons for learning multiple languages for me is understanding a point of view from a different community. Because we learn history and we learn things through the lens of a standardized form of a language that was standardized by those in power. So the paradigm is going to be different depending on who you're talking to. How did that feel for the people who had those things imposed on them? We talk about indigenous communities. This is a really important thing to keep in mind. How did they see history? How did they see what happened to their countries, their lands? How did they see what happens to their language? And so all of these things for me become super, super important. Do you ever feel guilty for deciding not to continue with a language, and how do you cope with it? On a basic level, maybe. On a basic level, I think sometimes, I wish I'd done more of that, or I wish I'd spent more time, but I let that go very, very quickly. These emotions I don't find particularly productive, and I don't find help me, and in fact, I find they hold me back. So I tend to let go of that and say, well, that happened. I'm going to share a philosophy that I heard online. I think it was on Instagram or somewhere very academic and philosophical, clearly. Me and my social media memes. But there was something that I read, and I shared it with somebody yesterday, and I'm going to share it with you today. The best time to plant a tree is 25 years ago, so you can enjoy its shade today. The second best time to plant a tree is right now.